What's the story of 1 times 1? Mrs. Wonderone can't help playing tricks on her friend. When she comes across Mr. Wonderone, she casts a spell and changes him into a Wonderone clown. 1 times 1 is 1. What's the story 1 times 2? Mrs. Wonderone can't help playing tricks on her friend. When she comes across Mrs. Two Squeak, she casts a spell and changes her into Two Squeak's clown. 1 times 2 is 2. What's the story 1 times? Mrs. Wonderone can't help playing tricks on her When she comes across Mr. Threekins, she casts a spell and changes him into Threekenstein clown. 1 times 3 is 3. What's the story of 1 times 4? Mrs. Wonderone can't help playing tricks on her When she comes across Mr. Vampfoot, she casts a spell and changes him into Vampfoot clown. 1 times 4 is 4. What's the story 1 times 4? Mrs. Wonderone can't help playing tricks on her When she comes across Mr. Flaming, she casts a spell and changes him into Flaming 5 clown. 1 times 5 is 5. What's the story 1 times 7? Mrs. Wonderone can't help playing tricks on her friend. When she comes across Mrs. Ram, she casts a spell and changes her into Ram 7 clown. 1 times 7 is 7. What's the story? One time's there. Mrs. Wonder One can't help playing tricks on her friend. When she comes across Mr. Spooky, she casts a spell and changes him into Spooky 8 Clown. 1 times 8 is 8. What's the story? 1 times 9. Mrs. Wonder One can't help playing tricks on her friend. When she comes across Mr. Slimy, she casts a spell and changes him into Slimy 9. 1 times 9 is 9. What's the story? 1 times 10. Mrs. Wonder One can't help playing tricks on her friend. When she comes across the Magi 10, she casts a spell and changes her into Magi 10 Potion. 1 times 10 is 10. Remember my trick. You only have to memorize the stories that start with the smallest. What's the story of 1 times 2? Mrs. Wonder One can't help playing tricks on her friend. When she comes across Mrs. Two Square, she casts a spell and changes her into Two Squeaks Clown. 1 times 2 is 2. What's the story? 2 times. When Mrs. Two Squeak meets Mr. Two Squeak, she invites him to share a magnificent slice of Mrs. Two Squeaks nibbles a corner at them, and Mr. Two Squeaks nibbles a corner. The two mice aren't hungry. They put the rest of their meal to one, which has taken the shape of a 2 times 2 is 4. What's the story of 2 times 3? When the mouse Two Squeak sees Frankenstein the monster right in, she panics. She runs away and pushes Frankenstein as she. He falls backwards and a bolt falls out. The twisted bolt takes the shape of a 2 times 3 is 6. What's the story of 2 times 4? When Two Squeak sees Vamp 4 disguised as a mouse, she is not so sure. But a gust of wind blows away his false ears in the shape of a, and the imposter is revealed. 2 times 4 is 8. What's the story 2 times 5? When Two Squeak comes across flaming fire, she is so frightened. She runs away as fast as she can. But flaming fire breathes out an enormous and changes the frightened mouse into a boiling hot. The head of the snail takes the shape of a 1, and its shell the shape. 2 times 5 is 10. What's the story of 2 times 6? When Two Squeaks sees Scorpio 6 the scorpion, she is frightened he will sting her. She is terrified and runs. She scurries down a mouse hole and hides behind a wall. Ugh, Two Squeaks is safe at last. 2 times 6 is 12. What's the story of 2 times 7? Great, it's Christmas. Two Squeaks and Ram 7 decide to give each other a present. Two Squeaks, judging by the lovely, thinks her present is a she loves cheese. Ram 7 would like to get. Hers are also old. They both open their present. Two Squeaks has got a sock in the shape of a wall. She is so disappointed she throws. As for Ram 7, she finds an old piece of cheese in the she throws it away too. A very Merry Christmas. 2 times 7 is 14. What's the story of 2 times 8? When 2 Squeak is surprised by the whirling of Spooky 8, she gives a little shriek. This wakes up a cat who was sleeping, and when she sees the cat, she yells even louder. The ghost has found someone scarier than the dustbin, and its lid make the cat and its tail make a 2 times 8 is 60. What's the story? 2 times 9. When 2 Squeak meets her friend Slimy 9, she is delighted to have it, but the 2 friends are petrified. When the hook of a fishing rod catches Slimy 9, and worst of all, at the end of the fishing rod is a horrible. The fishing rod is in the shape of a 1, and the fish is in the shape of 2 times 9 is 18. What's the story of 2 times 10? When 2 Squeak meets a potion magic, it makes her very, very hungry. She dives headfirst into the cold and comes out feeling very full. She gives an enormous magic bug and blows a bubble in the shape of a 0. 2 times 10 is 20.